I want to talk about, because this movie's so quotable, and that's something that I've been telling everybody that I've talked to that's been a part of this film so far. It's like I can just see myself, I don't know, cooking in the kitchen, and then a quote just randomly pops into my mind based off of whatever situation I am that may fit. So I'm curious, do you ever find yourself in situations like that where you may even quote your own material?
Um, I don't know if I quote my own material. I do find myself doing some mannerisms for the characters that I play. Like Joaquin had a way of standing where he would like do his hand like this, and like I don't know what I was doing, but like literally slowly did. I was like and it was just like the Joaquin mannerism
Yeah,
because that's so him. And every thinking of characters recently, like Guillermo has a certain stance when he stands at What We Do in the Shadows. That they're not yours, naturally. So when you fall into it, you're like, what am I doing right now? What am I? It's just like this.
right.
And it's always nice to like, but it's always nice to hear like fans when they quote like stuff from projects and whatnot. And this movie certainly has tons and tons of quotable things. I wouldn't be surprised if there was shirts with some of the stuff that just Michaela alone just has some really great stuff.
Yeah.
And her delivery, my tchotchke, just like her dog. And I just love where her voice lands and the intonation and all that. But every character has that, so it's very quotable, this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I laughed probably for 5 minutes, but it's when you tell a character to shut the F up, let them, and I'm going to kill your ass. Um, I'm just curious, like, how do you go about, 'cause since you're talking about the language of the film, like, how do you go about casualizing that language?
Well, it's hard, right? So that line actually I changed a little bit with the director's permission. I thought it was in the moment, just in the moment, it felt like that. The frustration of someone, saying something so negative and nasty, but also in the same note, loving that person.
Yeah,
It's just like sometimes you get in a fight with a family member, or you say things you don't mean, but they come out, and it's like, too late. You can't put it back in. So it had to feel like that. It's like, I didn't want to say this. You made me say this, and it comes out, and it's too late. But it's also frustration because you hate what you're about to do, or you know what I mean. So without giving too much away, it's just that they had to be, it was a thin line to like play on. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and it worked
yeah.
out at the end.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure if I were to rewatch this, I would find more and more things because there's always something going on in the background, especially during sequences where there's a bunch of you in a room and there's like it's like stacked within the frame where there's like, for instance, there's the scene where Marcus pulls out the gun and then everybody else pulls out their gun, but you pull out a chair. Uh,
Yeah.
So, are you aware of everything that your fellow actors are doing within those sequences? Or are you even surprised when you watch it where you're like, oh my gosh, I missed that?
Honestly, I wasn't even aware I grabbed the chair.
Oh, really?
Sometimes when you look back at the stuff, the choices you make, again, like you're in character, so you're doing the choices that you feel that this character would make. Of course, you're still, connected to that character because it's your body and your vessel who's doing it. But honestly, that must have been, looking back, that must have been very fucking just to be grabbing a chair as a defense. But it makes sense. It does make sense that he's not ready, and he's not.
Yeah.
Everyone else is loaded with guns, and he has weapons too. Anything can become a weapon for Joaquin. So that's funny that you said that. But yes, you are aware of other people's choices as well. I remember again, thinking like Michaela just holding the gun and the way that she holds it, it's like that's not how. And there's a scene where some of us are just like, what are you doing? It's like, you guys, it's like the way you're holding the gun is like, that's dangerous altogether. Like it's just, you're gonna shoot someone's like, I know how to control a gun. It's just like, that's hilarious to me, the idea that you think you know it all, but you don't. We're human beings and we make choices, and not always are the right choices.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you about the conversations you had when it came to the art of Joaquin's yoga technique as he's sipping on his coffee and just lightly touching it, enjoying the day.
That was a choice I made just because I think the approach I took to Joaquin was the idea of very almost hipster, idea of like this is how I live my life. I'm grounded, and you think you're connected to the earth and whatnot, but you also have millions in the bank account for him. And so it's a choice. He can open a yoga studio. He can, open it only on once a week because he doesn't need to work. He doesn't need the financial assistance. He's doing it because this is who he is and this is his life. He's a good person. But the choices for Joaquin came just from experience. I think watching people. I love watching people like in LA. I live in LA, and just watching how people interact, and it's good character development, and just like people in your data bank, they go, oh, that was the way that person. Okay, I'm putting that in the bank and saving it for later. Sure enough, there was plenty to play with Joaquin. I was just going through like a Rolodex of like ideas that I put away for a character that would benefit from these mannerisms.
Yeah. Like I would love to see a prequel movie that doesn't even have to be within this genre. Just like for instance, I'm curious if he raided Lenny Kravitz's closet to get his scarf.
You know what? I was so at first when I got to the costume fitting, there were so many layers. I was like, this is a lot. Like there's like ponchos and there's like layers and sweaters and there's like throws that he throws over himself, and I thought this is a lot of layers. But then shooting in the snow and shooting in the middle of winter in upstate New York, I loved it. I was probably the warmest cast member. I really was. I just was layered with so many things, and the idea that like fashion, right, and just the things kept piling on him. Like it looked like a couch that had been thrown with like people come up for a party and they throw like all the sweaters and jackets over the couch, and then he just wakes up and he was underneath the whole time. And just like the layers on him. But it was fashion, and not for a second did you think that it was a mistake. You thought everything down to like, the hat, and what he wore, and it was just it was all fashion for him. And from afar, you're like, that's a lot happening. To him, it's the latest couture.
So you were probably like in that scene from Dumb and Dumber where he's like, I got this extra pair of gloves. Are you okay? Especially at the end with the phallic totem pole.
Yeah. I keep laughing at those gloves because they weren't helpful during winter. There were these skinny white leather gloves that only covered about your knuckles and left the bare hand open. So we were shooting the scene outside, and the only part of my body that was freezing was the palm of my hands and the back of my hands, because only the tips were covered. And it became part of him, and he would not cover with anything less than. So you just see his bare hands the whole time.
Yeah. Since you're part of this, you're part of What We Do in the Shadows. Both of them kind of have fun with the genre, deconstruct it. I'm curious, because you've been a part of these projects, how does it change how you perceive horror? Are you taking it in any differently? Are you going back to revisit things and you're like, man, because we made a joke about that, it kind of ruins it for me a little bit? Or do you find it more funny?
I think it's different, when you get to set. There is things that I find sometimes I'm like, oh, it's probably best not to do that, since, Guillermo might have done that in Shadows or whatnot. I'm very particular about like maybe not having the same hairstyle that Guillermo has, things like that people will be thrown off if they see the same kind of style on a different character in a different project. They'll be like, that's the same guy, right? And it's like, it's a different character. But I think the proof is in the pudding. The character between Guillermo and Joaquin are very, very different. They're completely opposite. So that's good. And but getting to set is always like, especially with werewolves and vampires and that world and that genre, which is so fun to play. If you would have told me as a kid that this is what I'd be doing for a living, I would have been thrilled, first of all, and second, I would have asked you, how did you get in my room? And but I just literally I'm so happy and glad to be working with this cast. They're so great at what they do, and every choice of mannerisms they made for these characters are iconic. I just love this project so much.
I know it's easy to get caught up in the fear of the situation. I know it's easy to point the finger and fear each other. But can we all just take a breath Please hold off on being enemies. All I'm asking is that you be a good neighbor. Like Mr. Rogers.
With guns, though.
With guns, yes.